Part 1, the Erie Canal. We would be remiss without first expressing our many thanks to Charlie Ellis and Crystal Combs for inviting us and other Lake Pleasant Sailing Club members to spend a week as their guests at their beach house in Weekapaug, Rhode Island. Absent that invitation, it's likely we would not have made this trip, opting instead to return to the Pacific Northwest and or Catalina Island for our 2015 summer cruise. In the event, it afforded us the inspiration and opportunity not only to cruise New England waters, but also combine with that vacation with 5 days on the Erie Canal en route to Rhode Island, visits with friends and family along the way in Colorado, Illinois, Ohio, New Jersey, and Delaware, culminating in 300 nautical miles in 2 weeks on the Nanticoke River in Delaware and the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. The first and longest leg of our road trip was an 8-day drive of 2,560 miles from our home in Peoria to our launch point at Seneca Lake State Park in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. This map shows the northern route we took, highlighted in red. After 8 days on the road, including a 2-day delay in Illinois for trailer brake repairs, we finally arrived on May 29th at the Seneca Lake State Park in Geneva, New York, our launch point for the Erie Canal portion of our cruise. Here's the launch ramp at Seneca Lake. It had a rather shallow and soft bottom with depths 3 feet or less near the ramp. That would have been a bad news for a deep draft sailboat, but not a problem for us as we only draw 2.5 feet. We had strapped our 8-foot Botex fiberglass dinghy onto the back of the pickup truck in order to reduce windage and stress on the Albin swim platform and davits during the long trip over the sometimes rough interstate highways. Since we would not need to use the dinghy on the canal, we left it on the truck as shown here. And we're on the water at last. This is Stivers Seneca Marine Marina. The state park, which also has its own marina, and Stivers straddle the entrance to the Seneca-Cayuga Canal, a 13-mile stretch which connects Seneca Lake to the west with Cayuga Lake to the east. Seneca Lake is 28 miles long. Both lakes are long and narrow, with few if any coves. Passes are required for boats traveling on the canal, which costs either $25 for a 10-day pass or $50 for a season pass. Stivers is a vendor that is supposed to sell passes, so after launching we motored over there to purchase our pass, but they were out of stock, which meant we'd have to buy one when we got to the first lock on the Cayuga-Seneca Canal. A storm front was forecast to arrive later with heavy rains expected, so we spent the night in the slip and left the marina at 6:40 a.m. in order to get to Seneca Falls before the storms hit. We arrived at the first lock, CS4, at Waterloo at 8:50 a.m., where we bought our pass, then went through the paired locks CS2 and CS3 2 hours later, and a brief stop at Seneca Falls. Locks 2, 3, and 4 combined for a total drop of 63 feet. We transited Lock 1 at Cayuga Lake at 11:30, but had a rough entry with the wind. From the launch ramp to Lock 4 was about 5 miles, and 3.8 more miles to Locks 2 and 3 at Seneca Falls, then about 3.5 additional miles to Lock 1 at the head of Cayuga Lake. Along the way on the Cayuga-Seneca Canal, we spotted this steam-powered replica of Humphrey Bogart's African Queen. We flew our LPSC Burgee throughout our cruise on the canal. This is the Seneca to Cayuga Canal.
And I just hit the red button to stop it?
Yep.
That's not good.
Morning. We stopped here at Lock 4 and tied off briefly in order to purchase our 10-day canal pass. Otherwise, I would have stayed aboard the boat and grabbed hold of the dock lines as we did for all the other lock transits.
Water level's going down very quickly, so Steve has to hold on when we descend in the lock.
Pictured here is the Trinity Episcopal Church in Seneca Falls. After making our way through Lock 4, we made a brief mid-morning stop in the town of Seneca Falls before transiting the paired locks CS2 and CS3, which are just beyond the church, before reaching Cayuga Lake. We didn't get any pictures of lock CS1 as we found it worked better with both of us holding dock lines inside the locks, one bow line and one stern line. It's similar to many other locks we saw. This photo is off the internet. From this lock, it's about 4 miles north to the junction with the main Erie Canal. Next, we arrived at Lock 25 about 11:30 a.m., our first lock westbound on the main Erie Canal, about 1.5 miles from the Cayuga Canal junction. Lock 25 was a 6-foot lift. From the junction of the Cayuga-Seneca Canal with the main Erie Canal, westbound to Fairport was about 40 miles, with 7 more locks to transit. In all, from Seneca Lake to Fairport and back was about 110 miles round trip with 22 lock transits. The 4 locks going eastbound on the Cayuga-Seneca Canal were drops in elevation, and the 7 locks we transited on the main Erie Canal going westbound from the Cayuga Canal junction to Fairport were lifts in elevation. On the Cayuga-Seneca Canal eastbound from Seneca Lake, lock CS4 was a 13-foot drop, CS3 a 24-foot drop, CS2 a 25-foot drop, and lock CS1 an 8.9-foot drop. On the main Erie Canal, lock 25 and lock 26 were both 6-foot lifts, lock 27 a 12.5-foot lift, lock 28A a 19-foot lift, lock 28B a 12-foot lift, lock 29 a 16-foot lift, and lock 30 a 16.4-foot lift. Our first overnight stop on May 30th was the town dock at Lyons, New York, shown here looking east. Cold and wet weather had settled over the region with highs in the mid-50s. Due to rainy weather, we spent 2 nights docked here and took in a movie matinee seeing Tomorrowland at the town's single-screen theater. A nearby town fire station just up the hill to the left allows boaters to use their restrooms and showers for free, although voluntary donations are accepted. Our biggest challenge during this segment of the cruise was trying to keep the windshield from fogging up. The wet weather didn't stop this young Amish fellow from driving his horse and buggy. He had unhitched his horse and tied it off nearby in order to go fishing on the canal. Next, it was on through Lock 27 on the way to Fairport on June 1st. Although the weather had begun to clear later in the day, it started out chilly with low overcast, light fog, and drizzle. At least we were dry and sheltered in the pilot house and not exposed to the weather in an open cockpit. We didn't take any photos of Lock 27, but continued on to a brief day stop in Palmyra to pump out our holding tank. By this time, we had refined our technique for locking on the canal. The locks have long lines hanging down the walls about every 15 or 20 feet. Helen would drive the boat into the lock and over to the side while I stood up on the bow with a boat hook. I would grab a bow line, then while holding on to that line, I'd walk aft and hook a stern line. Helen would then leave the engine running in neutral and come up on deck, and I would hand off the stern line to her, and we'd hold on bow and stern as the boat went up or down with the water level. In this situation, you don't tie off the lines to the deck cleats, you just hold on. We brought along work gloves since the lines are slimy from being immersed most of the time. This is why we didn't get many pictures of lock transits. I had rigged fender boards and extra fenders to protect the side of the boat from the rough concrete walls. Say hi.
Hi.
It's Mama driving.
Hey, I love it.
We made a brief stop at Palmyra, New York, which is where the LDS Mormon religion was founded by Joseph Smith in the 1820s, during the time the Erie Canal was first being constructed. The small unmanned marina at Palmyra was located in a little cove cut into the south bank of the canal and consisted of a single side-tie dock with water and shore power connections, a coin-operated pump out at the dock, and restrooms with showers in a building on shore. Restrooms with showers were located in a building behind where I was standing when I took this photo. After a brief stop to use the restrooms, pump the tank, stretch our legs, we continued on toward Fairport. In some places, the roads run right alongside the canal. There was very little boat traffic on the canal, but just as we were about to pass the small Mid-Lakes Marina near Macedon, we saw this Albin 25 named Flicka coming the other way. He pulled into the marina to his regular slip, and we hailed him on the VHF. We pulled in and had a nice chat comparing notes on how we had rigged our boats. It was the only other Albin 25 we saw on the water during the entire East Coast cruise. And so we arrived in Fairport on the afternoon of June 1st, the end of the westbound leg of the canal cruise. It was the only port that charged for overnight tie-ups, $7 flat rate, but did offer shore power hookups and restrooms with showers. The nights were still chilly, so we used our electric heater to warm the cabin. Fairport is famous for many fine old Victorian homes and its unique century-old lift bridge, not to mention its connections with the Erie Canal. This sign tells the story of the bridge and reads, "The Erie Canal, completed in 1825, opened up opportunities for business and settlement, making the village of Fairport the center of population and economic activity in the town of Parenton. The canal has been widened several times, the last time in 1912 to 1913 when the lift bridge was installed. According to Ripley's Believe It or Not, the lift bridge is the only one in the world built on a bias with the south end higher than the north end. It is also an irregular decagon with no square corners and no two angles the same. A century later, this engineering feat continues to serve the community and add to the village character of Fairport." We were lucky to see the bridge in action as a Sea Dory 22 came along and needed to pass under the bridge, which, when lowered, is too low for even small cabin cruisers to pass under.
Didn't lift the bridge just enough to lie. And here it comes down. Wow, that's amazing. I think the sounds are as much fun as the bridge lowering.
We began our eastbound return leg back to Seneca Lake on Tuesday, June 2nd. After breakfast and morning coffee on board, we explored Fairport before coming back to clean up the boat and fill the water tank. We then cast off around 2:20 p.m. We made it as far as locks 30 and 29, but the lockmasters close up and go home at 5 p.m., so we had to spend the night just west of lock 28B at Newark, a town we had bypassed on the way westbound. That evening, we pulled in and tied up at the town dock in Newark. This dock, which is free, has a dockmaster on duty and also has very clean and modern restrooms, showers, and laundry facilities in a building next to the dock. The next few slides show murals on the wall next to the dock depicting some of the history of the Erie Canal. The upper floor of the white building is the dockmaster's office. The lower floor, where the murals are, houses the restrooms with showers and laundry. This is the Newark Town Dock looking west. Although we were eastbound, we tied up facing west so that our shore power cord would reach the plug-in. While here we met and spoke with another boater. The boat tied up in the far background was an 82-year-old man who had brought his large trawler single-handed up the ICW from Florida to New York, up the Hudson River to Albany, and the full length of the Erie Canal on the way to his hometown of Tonawanda near Buffalo. The next morning, June 3rd, we embarked on our last day on the canal, transiting the remaining locks back to the ramp on Seneca Lake to haul out.
Oh, it's okay. I'm doing a little video.
That's got a cool.
Yeah.
Along the way, we passed this westbound cruising yacht, one of the few vessels we encountered underway. There is no commercial traffic on the canal, only recreational boats. As foul as the weather had been on portions of the westbound leg, the weather on the eastbound leg could not have been better, as we enjoyed sunshine and mild temperatures during those last 2 days on the canal. And so ended the Erie Canal segment of our East Coast cruise, back to where we started at Seneca Lake State Park Boat Ramp to put La Dolce Vita back on the trailer. From there, we were on the road again, bound for Rhode Island, where in Part 2 we cover spending the following week with the LPSC crew at the Ellis Beach House, launching La Dolce Vita in Pawcatuck River and cruising the Block Island Sound. End of Part 1. Ahead in Part 2, Rhode Island and the Ellis Beach House.